All right, mate, how you doing? Welcome back to another episode of IMO. Spain have sacked their manager the day before the World Cup begins. This is madness. Why did they do it? How is it going to affect their chances at the World Cup and their players? Who are they going to get in as a replacement? We're going to discuss all these things and more in this episode of IMO. So let's go. Well, I was not expecting to be making this video, okay? Spain have sacked their manager, Lopetegui, the day before the World Cup begins. Mental. He's going to Real Madrid, okay? We knew Real Madrid needed a new manager. Zidane stepped down after winning 3 Champions Leagues in a row. And perhaps in a good decision, they've decided to appoint Lopetegui. This guy had never been beaten as a Spanish manager, 20 games in charge, I think 14 wins, 6 draws. Decent record. However, you have to question the timing of their decision. They have absolutely stitched him up. Why were they so adamant they had to announce their decision about their new manager right before the World Cup? I understand it from a Real Madrid perspective in the sense that they wanted to make sure their fans knew they had everything in order and they weren't going to have a long period of time without a manager. But when they decided to go for the Spanish national team manager, surely they would have realised as a Spanish club the repercussions of announcing this at this time. What's worse is that the Spanish FA apparently had no knowledge of the appointment until 5 minutes before the announcement went worldwide. When they found out in that 5 minutes, they asked for the news to be delayed until after the World Cup, and Real Madrid refused. This is just another example of Real Madrid thinking they are the biggest and most important thing in football, even bigger than the country they play in. And make no mistake, they are the biggest football club in the world right now, and the best football club in the world, but they clearly don't care much about the Spanish national team. And what's the manager thinking? Lopetegui should be buzzing that after managing his country at the World Cup, he's going to go to the biggest job in world football. Instead, he's no longer going to get to manage his country at the World Cup. It's been taken away from him. Surely it can't have been his choice to announce it at this time. I know that he told the Real Madrid players in the squad, and then it got out to the other players, like the Barcelona players, etc. And I guess the position came a little bit untenable. Maybe that was a bad decision for him to let them know that. Did his excitement get the better of him? Either way, it's the Spanish fans that are really losing out here. The Spanish FA were left in a very difficult position. Rubiales, who's like the chief of the Spanish Football Federation, he's only been in that position for 1 month, by the way. He ultimately made the call to get rid of the manager. Now, there's a little bit of an ego battle here, a locking of horns, because they felt that they'd been affronted and a little bit mugged off, to be honest, by Lopetegui not giving them the respect, I guess, to talk to them about his decision first, which I think is really poor from him. But then, are they cutting their nose off to spite their face? Could they just have taken it on the chin, been really disappointed with him, given him a slap on the wrist, but letting him stay in charge because ultimately it might be better for the team? It seems like the players weren't that bothered. Apparently, the players made an appeal to the Spanish FA not to get rid of the manager. This wasn't just Real Madrid players like Sergio Ramos, but apparently players like Andres Iniesta as well. Ultimately, the Spanish FA felt compelled to make this decision. They said that you just can't do things like this with the Spanish national team job. And I respect that they're identifying the importance of the position and the respect that should be shown by anyone in that position. Likewise, Big Sam was sacked after just 1 game in charge of the England team. If he'd still been in charge now, and that secret footage of Big Sam came out today that showed that he was doing a few little dodgy deals behind the scenes, which ultimately got him sacked, would England have sacked him the day before the World Cup? I think they probably would have as well, to be fair. It's times like this you really appreciate as an England fan having Gareth Southgate in charge, because let's face it, no big clubs are coming for him right now. If this does end up coming back to hurt Spain in this World Cup, and they're one of the favourites right now, they were at least before this, considered probably in the 4 or 5 clubs that most likely to win the World Cup, who are the Spanish fans going to blame? Are they going to blame Lopetegui for taking the job and not telling or consulting with his current employers first? Are they going to blame Real Madrid for putting the statement out there and kind of, disrupting the apple cart? Or are they going to blame the Spanish FA for getting rid of Lopetegui because their pride was hurt and they could have just kept him in charge? I think it will be a combination of all three. But of course, there's no guarantee this could hurt Spain. There's a chance it could bring the changing room closer together. Sometimes traumatic events like this can have that effect. And if we're honest, I think it's less disruptive this happening in a national team than it would be at a club team. The Spanish national team in particular has so much experience in it. Players that have won World Cups, Champions Leagues, European Championships before, like, Sergio Ramos, Sergio Busquets. There's so many big players in there. I mean, Andres Iniesta. In many ways, this team might manage itself. I'm more interested to see how these changes might affect the slightly more turbulent players, like Diego Costa, for example. If him and a coach clash heads, it doesn't usually end well for the team. We saw this at Chelsea. How is the new Spanish manager going to feel about Diego Costa? It is Fernando Hierro, by the way. You may remember Hierro as the goal-scoring centre-back who played for Real Madrid and Spain, even Bolton. More recently, he was the Real Oviedo manager, of course. Didn't actually do an unbelievable job at Real Oviedo. He's currently in his his second stint as sporting director at Spain, he's been brought in to manage the team for the World Cup. He'll know the players, he'll know the system, the way they want to play. This shouldn't have too much of a turbulent effect on the dressing room. Other names that were bandied about were like getting Zinedine Zidane in or bringing Vincent Del Bosque back. Some people even said Arsene Wenger. That was never going to happen. Hierro is probably the safest bet beyond keeping the manager that was already there. Apparently back in the South Africa 2010 World Cup, when Spain went on to win the whole thing, but it started with a really poor performance and defeat to Switzerland, Fernando Hierro was actually really important in bringing the change room back together. So there's a chance this appointment might actually make Spain even stronger. But the general reaction right now is this is not the sort of drama you want a day before the World Cup. Their group, with teams like Morocco and Iran, they should be going through, but they're going to have a difficult matchup against Portugal, who could pounce on this. I mean, I guess it remains to be seen whether this does have a detrimental effect on Spain or not. It's certainly got everyone talking. And as much as I believe all those players have the ability to focus on their jobs on the pitch, there's no way they're not talking about it and thinking about it. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs in that first Spain game. There would have been a lot anyway, but now it's extra interesting. What I'm also interested in is the situation of Lopetegui going forward. I'm not 100% sure I'm nailing that pronunciation, by the way. But what does this mean for him? He could be public enemy number one in Spain if this ends up derailing their tournament and they say go out in the group stages. As a result, would Real Madrid still want him as the manager? If he proved to be an unpopular choice, they've got the money just to sack him straight away, pay him off. Imagine that. 1 minute you're about to manage your country and then go on to be the Real Madrid manager after it, and then suddenly you're doing neither. It could be an absolute misery compiler. But if his reputation with the Spanish players is still safe, people like Sergio Ramos, Isco, Marco Asensio, all being at Real Madrid and in the Spanish national team should help him. Likewise, it could help him bring in new Spanish players to the Real Madrid team, like, for example, David De Gea, the goalkeeper, who Real Madrid have been interested in for a long time, and apparently Lopetegui has a very good relationship with him. Either way, this certainly hasn't hurt the other teams in the World Cup. I can imagine a lot of team talks for teams that are about to play Spain are going to be talking about how they're in disarray and they've got to pounce on that opportunity to beat them. But I do expect the experienced professionals in the Spanish national team to lead by example. This is where people like Sergio Ramos and Piqué really step up. The big question though from this IMO is, what would we have done if we were in charge of the Spanish FA and this happened and we got a little bit undermined by our manager, or a lot undermined to be honest, and he went and took a job without telling us. He had just signed a new contract, by the way. That's another really important thing to say. Very recently he signed a new contract as the Spanish national team manager, so he was sticking around. It wasn't like everyone knew he was leaving at the end of the World Cup. So I do understand the decision, and if this happened a couple of weeks ago, maybe you could argue there's more time for the new manager to come in. But because of the proximity to the World Cup, maybe that was in the thinking of Real Madrid. They thought, we can announce it, they're not going to sack him now. But because of that proximity, I do wonder whether the Spanish FA have cut their nose off to spite their face a little bit and made a mistake in getting rid of him. If the players were still behind him, this could have worked out. We've seen lots of managers announce before the tournament they're going to be leaving. For example, Sir Bobby Robson, the England manager, who was in charge of our second best ever World Cup performance in 1990 when we lost in the semi-finals on penalties. He'd announced before the tournament that he was going to become the PSV manager. Everyone knew Louis van Gaal was leaving the Netherlands after the last World Cup, and he got them to the semi-final as well. The difference in this case is Lopetegui wasn't leaving. He'd signed a new contract and there was no discussion of him leaving until Real Madrid came knocking. I don't resent him for taking the Real Madrid job, but why they couldn't have announced it after the World Cup is beyond me. Real Madrid maybe could have just been a little bit more secure in their decision, not needing to appease the fans so quickly, understand the importance of the Spanish national team and their mission at the World Cup, and just delay the announcement. Or even just have a proper chat with the Spanish FA before, a couple of days, just say, this is what we want to do. How do you think we should announce it? They would have said, can you wait? And if Real Madrid had really felt they couldn't wait, and Lopetegui really felt it couldn't wait, maybe there still would have been the goodwill between the club, the nation, and the manager that didn't lead to this outcome. I do think the Spanish FA were in a kind of catch-22 situation where if they'd left him in, and then they'd had a bad World Cup, they would have been blamed for leaving him in. Ultimately, it's not their fault this happened. It's Real Madrid and Lopetegui's fault. But this definitely could have been handled better. What do you guys think? Leave a comment below. Who are you blaming most? The manager, Lopetegui, Real Madrid, or the Spanish FA? Should he even have been thinking about taking the Real Madrid job when he was days away from one of the biggest jobs you can have as a Spanish manager, managing the national team at a World Cup that they could win, and they could still win? It's a really difficult situation. I don't envy the people at the Spanish FA having to deal with this right now. And hopefully, for the Spanish fans' sake, the Spanish boys can still perform. One thing's for sure, the World Cup never disappoints when it comes to drama. I'm sure there's plenty more twists and turns still to come. I thought Sané not being in the Germany squad was going to be the biggest shock of this tournament so far, but this one has definitely trumped it. In other news, just quickly as well, today it was announced that USA, Mexico and Canada have won the right to host the 2026 World Cup. I think that's going to be a very fun World Cup to go to, probably more fun than Russia and Qatar, and I think they'll do a great job. They've got the infrastructure for it. However, I'm a little bit annoyed as an England fan, if I'm honest, because we tried to host the 2018 World Cup, Russia beat us to that, we spent a lot of money on that World Cup bid, and by the time USA co-host it in 2026, that will only be 32 years since they last hosted it in 1994, whereas the gap from England hosting it in 1966 to when we could possibly next host it in 2030 will be 64 years. That's double the amount of time between when USA last hosted it. I think that's a little bit unfair, particularly considering we've been trying to host it. I know there's rules that have come into place, meaning it can't be in the same confederation twice in a row, so it'll never go like Europe, for example. I just think maybe the 2026 World Cup should have gone to a nation that hasn't hosted it. Okay, Canada haven't hosted it before, but Mexico have hosted it twice since England last hosted it, in 1970 and 1986. Ultimately, money talks. I'm not complaining in the sense that I think it'll be a bad World Cup. I think it'll be fantastic, and I'll hopefully be there. But I do feel a little bit annoyed as an England fan, because let's face it, another World Cup in England would be amazing. Anyway though, my mind goes to Russia now. I'm going to be going in the next few days. I cannot wait. I've got to pack my bag, and hopefully I'm going to see England win some games. Drop a like on this video if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. Leave me a comment below with any of your thoughts on the Lopetegui situation, or of course the World Cup 2026 situation. Make sure you've clicked the notification bell so you know whenever I upload a brand new World Cup video, and I'll see you next time. Until then, don't go changing.